Hey, good morning and welcome to Friday, February 12th, Faculty Spotlight. I'm Linda Jackson. I'm your host for today at this snowy day, but we slid our way in and so that we can engage in this wonderful, wonderful faculty spotlight today. I'm excited because I had an opportunity before we got started to talk to our guests today. And I've learned even more than what you had an opportunity to read in that very short bio. So today's faculty spotlight is on, and it's a long name, and I told her that after her acronym, she has 4 names. That's very impressive. But Reverend Dr. Michelle Kelly McQueen-Williams. And we first started and said, I had a thought just a number of years ago, why is it Reverend Doctor and not Dr. Reverend? And so after some research into it, I learned why. And her and I had a discussion about that, and we both had it right. It's because God comes before all. So no matter what sequence that you get your scholarly degrees in, it's always going to be Reverend first, and then those other acronyms. So again, good morning and welcome to Faculty Spotlight. Dr. Williams said that I can call her Queenie. So I'm going to call her Reverend Dr. Queenie so I can get through those other 4 names very quickly. She has a very impressive education journey, and as you have read, and she clearly has dedicated her life work to education. And starting out very early in her education interests in K through 12. She has many degrees and a doctor's degree from VCU in, as we know, educational leadership right here in Virginia. She also has certifications and certificates for being an aspiring superintendent's program. She has worked with many young people and was one of the first principals of Harvey Elementary School. That's very impressive. During a time when a lot of females were being very challenged to be in the industry at that level. And she was one of the first. But after spending a number of years in the K through 12 system as a teacher or principal, she retired as the director of elementary education in the public school system. And now she is here with us at Virginia Union University. And she has come to us as our new executive director for PK experiences and educational initiatives at Virginia Union University. And so we're so excited about that. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that she has received a number of her degrees from Virginia Union University. And currently, on top of all that, she's a lifelong learner. You know how I know that? Because currently she is seeking out her Master's of Divinity and is now matriculating in the Doctorate of Ministry program at Virginia Union. On top of all that, as a retired person who came back to work as our executive director. How wonderful is that about her spirit and her interest in being in education? We want to know a little bit more about her. And of course, I could go on and on and on because her bio does, but we only have 30 minutes. And so I'm going to try to get in all that I can. And so we can dig a little deeper, peel that onion back and learn about Reverend Dr. Queenie and who she is. So Dr. Reverend Queenie, Michelle, Kelly, Williams, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? Tell us about yourself, your academic training, and your field of expertise, so we can get to know a little bit more about you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for hosting and having me. This is a dream come true. I'm really honored to be with you all today. And I want to thank Dr. Strayhorn, of course, Dr. Lucas, for the opportunity to come back home. I feel like I've come full circle, Dr. Jackson. I'm from the city's south side of Richmond. I graduated from Richmond Public Schools and Armstrong Kennedy High School at the time. Miss Armstrong Kennedy, I was the homecoming queen then. And I can remember my counselor telling me to go to Key Business College with my friends because my GPA was mediocre at best at the time. But I wanted to go to one college, and it was a college that my uncle and my cousins had gone to, and it was Virginia University. And so I applied and got accepted, and I had to, of course, do some summer remediation classes. But VU would give you a chance, and had great professors like Dr. Chapman, who serves now as our chaplain, and the late, great Dr. Watson, of course, Ms. Duckworth, who taught us the love of writing and the love of literature. And so I ended up majoring in journalism, graduating from here in 1987, and don't do the math. I was Miss Virginia Union at that time, and they didn't think a homegirl could pull that off. But once again, God provided. Mom said, Michelle, why don't you just stay in school and get your teaching degree? You've always said you wanted to teach. And I said, no, I got to get out in 4 years. That's the standard. You can't stay in school. You can't be on a long 5-6 year program. So I was determined to come out in 4 years. I came out and worked in television production and radio production, and I was an on-air personality, but I did not feel the value or valued in that role. I was called to teach. And so I ended up going back to VCU, always listen to your mother, and getting my teaching certification, and doing my student teaching at George Wythe High School right in the city. Just knew I was going back to teach at my old high school. But God, again, as we said, had other plans, and I landed my first job at Highland Springs High School in Henrico County, and taught English there for 5 years. Probably one of the best jobs I ever found. I found my purpose there. In my 3rd year, the superintendent was identifying leaders of color, and saw me on the hallway giving the kids the business one day, asking them to get to class. The next thing I know, I was an administrative aide where I taught half of the day, and taught half of the day, and did student discipline the other half of the day, and was sent then to the Darden Carey School of Leadership at UVA, and went to a leadership training program with other persons of color, because they had recognized and realized that we needed people of color to help our students of color. And so I ended up enrolling, as you said, in the Masters of Educational Leadership program. And after 5 years of teaching, became an assistant principal at Henrico High School, as we said, the youngest at the time. Stayed there about 5 years, and I had a young son, and I wanted to figure out, for me, those young people had made up their minds. By the time they got to high school, it was kind of hard to chip away at some of the things that had impacted them in their lives. So I sought elementary ed. And so I ended up going to being appointed to Glenlee Elementary School, which was a feeder school. This is God, a feeder school of Henrico High School. And I stayed there for about 7 years, and I worked on my PhD in educational leadership and got that. And as you said, got the wonderful opportunity to open up Harvey Elementary School with a team of educators in Eastern Henrico. It is actually still the newest school that's been built in Eastern Henrico as an elementary school. But during that time, it was around about 2008, I felt a call to ministry. But some of the ministers on the line know you kind of ignore that for a minute, but I couldn't ignore it. And after getting my PhD, I took a year off. Harvey had been built. We were in the school, and I decided to enroll in STVU, and I got the MDiv and became associate minister, where I'd been deacon and at First Baptist Church of South Richmond, my childhood church and my adulthood church. And so I've been there. And as you said, after 2 years at Harvey, got tapped to go to director of elementary schools. And I worked alongside principals and partnered with them to do the tough work of leading schools. It is very tough work. And so I retired, as you said, from, I thought, public education to pursue and transition into ministry more so, and enroll in the DMin program at Virginia Union. But I got the call about the executive director for K-12 experiences, and I felt like, oh my God, this is a dream come true for me to be able to give back to the place that poured so much into me. And so as I've said, I've come full circle, and so proud to be able to teach and to work in my alma mater and to serve the young people and adults here.
Well, I did leave out that you were crowned Miss VUU, and that's impressive also. Yes. As the church people would say, look at God.
Look at God.
Look
yes,
at God.
ma'am. I would agree with that.
So tell us a little bit about your experience as an educator, your experience as a principal, your experience as a reverend. Now, you and I said we could have a whole course, but we got to pack that into the next few minutes. So if you can give us the abridged version of that, just enough so we can just get a little more gleam as to who you are. And those positions have supported one another through your career. And we're sure they kind of ripple based on what you just shared with us. But give us a little taste of your experiences in those various areas.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Jackson. I would say that, and I call myself a person that has always operated in a dual context of ministry and in education. For me, education was ministry. It just wasn't called that. It was about the love of teaching, and whether it was teaching English or teaching the Bible in Bible study, whether it was a professional development for teachers or building leaders of the church, it was still ministry. And I can remember even in church leadership, through our leadership development programs, the two complemented one another. It wasn't an aside. I didn't see those as separate. And every year we would do a leadership conference at the church, and still do. And I would often find myself using the same principles that we taught school leaders to teach church leaders, and they benefited church leaders. Things like focusing on the little big things. I like to call them the little things that might seem little to the leader, whether it be a church leader or the school leader, but means a great deal to the people that you are leading and that you are serving. And so I always, to keep it as brief as possible, believe that there were no big I's and little U's in the schoolhouse or in the kingdom of God, whether it was a child, a teacher, administrator, a parent, whatever, whoever the stakeholder was, whether in the church or in the schoolhouse. We're on a level playing field, and God wants the best for each of us. And so I always spent my educational career in what they call challenged schools or at-risk schools, but while there and working with people that God sent there to work with me, I always had a sense of belief in operating in a sense of belief that every child could achieve above their expectation. I was a witness to that through my own life, and my belief in God supported that view. So I spent my spiritual life in the city working to support my pastors, reaching soul for Christ, and in education, doing the same thing, but just helping kids to get educated. And so ministry and education, they go hand in hand for me. And I'll just share that, when I was at Glen Lee Elementary School, at that time, it was the lowest performing school, one of the lowest performing schools in Henrico County. And that's when the SOLs had just begun. And I'm sure you know about those SOLs. And working with a sense of belief and love and expectations, we felt like we could change lives. But by the time I left there, we were one of the higher achieving schools. So we were right in the middle. And people would say, you can't tell Glen Allen from Glen Lee. And for me, that was the best compliment, because what we said is that we built relationships, and we expect students to do what we believe they could do, and we made them believe that they could do it. So that was my belief system then. It was replicated at Harvey when I was given the opportunity to open that school. It was a belief that we had to keep the main thing, which was changing lives. And just as in my belief in students, it runs parallel to my belief in God and his ability to do anything but fail. And so I just believe that we were called to be a light to students who were sometimes operating in darkness, just as we're called to be the light in the dark world. So as I said, educating young people and ministry, educators touch eternity, and that's good news. It's the good news of the gospel. So even when I retired from full-time education, as you said, I couldn't stay retired because those two go hand in hand. wrote a little memoir called Leadership in 3 Words, and it talks about those belief systems, and what I like to call love and expectation. But the greatest of these is love. And so that's kind of how I
Beautiful.
merge, how they support each other.
And all these ingredients have made a Reverend Dr. McQueen-Williams. All these ingredients have made you to be the professional educator you are today. If you could give any advice to students, clearly you'll be working with a PK-12 group who may not even be thinking about that right now, or those who may be on Zoom who are attending college or are thinking about attending college and haven't quite determined what they want to do. But what advice do you have for those considering majors or minors or degrees in education?
Well, that's a really good question. And I guess my advice to an aspiring educator would be to remember the kind of educator you wanted, the kind of teacher you wanted, someone who believed in you and saw your potential to succeed, and then become that teacher. Because in my mind, education is hard work. It's not for the faint of heart. It's for those who believe that children can be anything they want to be. You know, I just remember thinking I would never see, as young as I am, an African American president. But that just says through good education and a belief system that you can be anything you want to be. Even now with the African American female vice president, who would have thought that? That came from a teacher, because, you know, whether it was their first teacher, that was that parent, or that teacher in that classroom, somebody inspired them in a system of belief that they could do what it is they thought that they could do. And so I would say, don't go into it for the money, because there's not a lot of money in it. I would say don't go into it for summers off, because those summers are short. But go into it to make a difference in somebody's life, which is the golden rule of teaching. That's what I call the golden rule. But I would also say, I remember I like to tell stories, as a young administrator, and working with a young brother, I like to call him a young brother, who was about 15, and he was probably gifted. He was probably a gifted student, but he was presenting as a troubled student, and his behavior was on, as kids say, on fleek. But just seeing something in that young brother, he was very smart. His name was Pascal. And so he ended up failing a grade and being in my 10th grade student list, because at that time, your assistant principal, you went with your students up through from freshman to senior year. And I remember talking to him about it, what his name meant, that he was a mathematician, and we built a relationship. And I said, you know what, Pascal, the comprehensive day is just not working for you. You're not able to stay all day and not get in any trouble. Why don't we, look at getting you into a program that in voc ed, you're an engineer, you're a math guy, you can, and he went to the technical center halftime, came to school halftime, graduated with what we would call 3.0 GPA, from being a troubled child to somebody who became somebody. And we stay in touch to this day. As a matter of fact, he is my realtor. He now is a broker in a real estate firm. And but what that did, that building relationships, was holding him accountable, at the same time expecting that he would reach his potential, and caring about him as a person. And 20 years later, he is thriving. And so that's what we do as educators. And so that's the advice I would give: make an investment.
Thank you for that. Well, clearly educators are God's angels here on the planet to do exactly what you just said, to plant those seeds wherever we can. I'm going to, as we near the end, that's how fast it went by, this spotlight. I want to see if we have a little time for some questions and see if we can get you to, let me see if I can hear them. So I got my first question is, can you tell us one thing you would have in mind or plan to do as director of the K-12 partnership? I'm sorry, I needed to see it. Just someone wants to see how you're connecting all the dots of what you've learned and what you're bringing to this new position at Virginia Union. How would you then take that and use that in now your current position as executive director?
That's a great question. And I see my role here now as creating those great teachers with their clinical practices. And so I serve half-time in the School of Ed, helping to make sure that the teachers, the soon-to-be teachers, get the clinical experiences that they need to be the great teachers, to make sure they have good pedagogy, to make sure they have good classroom management, to make sure they get to see what it looks like when we have a total package teacher, a teacher that understands the importance of planning, the importance of observation and feedback, the importance of talking with students about growth and their goals of growth. And so I see that my role here is to be able to create those and to help with Dean Gators, who's been fabulous, to help to create those teachers that I would want to have and that I would want my child to have. And so that's part of the role, is to give those our soon-to-be teachers clinical and field experiences that will get them ready for the real work on the ground. Because you have to do it and you have to see it done well to become the teacher that you want to be. And then the other way I'd hope to enhance the university's goals and missions is to create a pipeline of students that will come to Virginia Union and matriculate through Virginia Union and graduate from Virginia Union and go on, that they might have the promise of the limitless future that I received when I was a student here. And so right now I'm working to cultivate the 50 scholars and the scholars that will come as a result of the cohorts that that our president's vision has yielded, where he wants to reach the school divisions, the regional school divisions, to make sure that there are cohort of students that don't have to worry about college, they just have to worry about getting here and letting us do the rest. And so that's what we're working on right now with the current 50 scholars, making sure they have activities and opportunities that will keep them connected and engaged to Virginia Union and get them here so that they might attend school and fulfill their scholarships.
So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Let me see if I can access that question. What is your favorite work of literature to teach? Let's keep that question in mind. And how has your experience at VU as a student and now as an employee shaped your views on life? And if we get through that, I have one more. I see a special person who wrote a question, and I want to make sure I can get her question out to you also. So we're on speed time right now. So can you respond to those two?
Well, the first one, and while I can still remember it, is Shakespeare. And I learned the love of Shakespeare from Dr. Duckworth, that was there for many years. And when I went into the classroom, I would create lessons that would, because the language is so terse, as it were, and students would have a hard time managing the vocabulary. And so we would have to do skits and all kinds of things to get them to understand, to thine own self be true. And that is what I have learned at Virginia Union. That's the full circle moment. To thine own self be true. You can be whatever it is you want to be. And so Shakespeare did that for me. And I forgot the second part of that question.
Well, basically, you were a student at one time. Yeah. Now you're an employee. So talk a little bit how that has evolved in your persona and your being as a professional woman, Reverend Doctor.
Well, I can't say enough about the Virginia Union experience. It is like no other. I tell people all the time, and I'm always recruiting, because when you come to Virginia Union, you feel like, or at least I did, you belong to something and to some place, and you were somebody. Teachers talk to you on the steps. You could sit there and you can go up there and talk to them. You call them on the telephone. It was a love, a network. It was a feeling. No shade on the PWIs. I went to VCU, but it just wasn't that connectivity. You didn't feel like a number. You felt like a person. And so I bring that back to the university.
All right, so this is my last quick one. So how do you plan, or have you created a pipeline for high school students to join the elementary, content, secondary, and special education fields?
Well, that's the goal. That's the goal. That's the goal. Okay. That we will be able to produce, especially students of color, to go into schools, especially where places that lack people of color, to build relationships. Because one thing we know about research is that we learn best from our people who relate to us and who understand us and who may have journeyed the way we have. And so that's the goal. And thank you for that question. Thank
you, Reverend Doctor. I'm gonna say the full name, Michelle Kelly McQueen-Williams. Reverend Dr. Queenie, what an honor it has been to be in your presence and to dig a little bit deeper into the person you are and have become. I've enjoyed my time with you, as others, I'm sure, who are on Zoom have also. If we had a green room, you and I would go into it, because I have at least 99 more questions for you. But our time has come to an end, and I thank you again. Thank you all for joining us today for the Faculty Spotlight. What a wonderful 30 minutes we had. Hopefully you had your coffee with you also, so we can warm up the day in this snowy day. Thank you, Dr. Strayhorn. You are the best. Thank you for just arranging this and allowing this moment for us to learn about those who walk amongst our campus as God's angels. Thank you. Until the next time, have a wonderful Friday. Valentine's Day is 2 days away, but didn't we just have a sweet time with Reverend Dr. McQueen-Williams? Thank you all. Till the next time.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Pleasure was all mine.